I'm Roger Ebert, film critic of the Chicago Sun-Times.
And I'm Gene Siskel, film critic of the Chicago Tribune. Coming up next at the movies, a thriller about hideous monsters in the basement of a vacation cottage. The Evil Dead is what is known in the trade as a ghoulie, or a splatter film, meaning it's full of blood and guts. The guts of people and the guts of animals. There is much slicing and dicing of human body parts in this story of the awakening of dead spirits at a vacation cottage in the mountains, where 5 young people are spending what turns out to be one horrible night. Sorry about all the blood. There's probably 60 minutes in this little 85-minute movie. 60 minutes that we couldn't show on TV. It's just too gross. The Evil Dead has some eye-popping special effects, but it has many more nauseating special effects. And you know, I sort of don't like a movie that makes me wonder whether or not I'm going to barf at it. The story becomes repetitive after a while. The kids turn into monsters and are hacked apart into submission one after another, and that's about it. So it may be campy to say you like this kind of picture, but I certainly did not.
I didn't enjoy it either, but I think I would have to give credit to the craftsmanship of the film. It was obviously inspired by Night of the Living Dead, and it's a very pure film, and that apart from all of these other dead teenager and knifing, slashing movies that we've had over the past several years, this one distills everything right down to the very basic thing. Put the kids in the cabin, throw things at them for an hour and a half, and that's the movie.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't waste any time on characterization, needless dialogue, or any meaning whatsoever.
Yeah, I just wish that they didn't have as much guts in it. I mean, I think that maybe some of those other things that you throw away and that maybe, you know, someone's rebelling against, I think might help a picture like this, rather than just, you know, if you want to see twice ground beef, go to a butcher shop. I don't know if I want to see that in a movie theater.
I got you.
And that's the first time I've ever compared a movie to ground beef. Next film is Evil Dead Part 2, the sequel to a surprisingly popular low-budget horror hit. Director Sam Raimi has filled this film with dozens of wild creatures in the old story of somebody opening the Book of the Dead and thus letting out evil spirits. Now, you know, you can really learn valuable things from the movies. This is one of the parts that Roger and I really like about being a film critic. If you ever see a book on a table with the title, Book of the Dead, don't open it. Just walk on by, as Dionne Warwick said. Unfortunately, this group of people open the book.
What the hell is that?
Maybe something trying to force its way into our world.
Right you are, sir, and here's what's coming your way, rather rapidly, in fact. That's a pretty good shot. There are dozens of creatures in this movie, and here at last, I think is a really good one, a female ghost doing a ballet number. I like that creature and some of the intentionally stupid dialogue at the beginning of this picture. But eventually, I'd say, after about 30 minutes, this film really wore out its welcome. With more creatures than human characters, this is a case, I think, of a film that is a lot of frosting and very little cake.
It ran out before the end. There was not enough inspiration to go for the whole time, but I really liked what did work, enough that I would recommend the movie. What the director here, Sam Raimi, is doing is satirizing all kinds of movie genres. The basic movies that he's satirizing in this movie are the Three Stooges movies. For example, the scene where the hand gets cut off and it keeps hitting the guy on his head and he has to put it down, and other scenes like that. Then there is a takeoff on Taxi Driver. The scene that we just saw, the ballet dance, where she lets her head roll down her arm and puts it back on again, that's Fred Astaire. And there are 7 or 8 other movie references in this film. It's not just a horror film. No. It's very clever and very funny.
Yeah, but it did run out for me. I got tired. I wanted something more than a little, you know, those are like 7 little clips strung together, and I would like a film that had a continuing story because, again, this film just has nothing to really say except the technology. I thought it was more technology than story.
Well, it was trying to be a bunch of comic one-liners, and it lasted for the first hour.
Okay.
It lasted for the first hour. And also, you wanted a movie you thought would be more interesting. If you could have seen what she had for lunch in this movie, you get to see what he has for lunch.
One curious thing about Darkman is that this movie looks and feels like the film version of a comic book, like a Batman or Dick Tracy, even though it's an original screenplay. It has all of the elements of one of those origin episodes that the comic book fans like to collect, the ones where they discover the story of how the superhero got to be that way and why, all about his childhood or his key experiences. In the case of Darkman, a scientist played by Liam Neeson is working on a way to create artificial skin. He wants to be able to rebuild human faces when his own face is hideously scarred by some mobsters who dunk him in a vat of acid. Darkman somehow survives the attack, escapes from the hospital, and resumes his research in a secret laboratory. Darkman was directed by Sam Raimi, who made both of the Evil Dead movies. I like the second one a lot, and it features some new twists on violence, including Darkman's revenge on one of the men who destroyed his life. Darkman's strategy in the movie is to make duplicate faces of the bad guys so he can pose as any one of them. Here's a tricky scene where a villain meets his own double.
Shoot him! Shoot him! Which one is the rat? Not me, Ant! Shoot him! Shoot him!
And that's one of several original things in this movie where the director, Sam Raimi, comes up not with just recycled stunts and gags out of old action pictures, but original ideas. That actor, by the way, was Larry Drake, who plays Benny on L.A. Law. And here, really, it's one of my favorite scenes in the movie where he's in the revolving door with himself, and even the audience is confused as to which guy is Darkman and which guy is the bad guy. This movie has a lot of original twists to it. One of the things I liked about Sam Raimi in his low-budget films like Evil Dead 2 was that even though he's working in a genre that everybody knows all about, he comes up with new ideas. In this one, the whole sequence where people are hanging from that skyscraper was interesting. The whole helicopter thing where the guy is hanging from the end of the rope, that was well done. The movie itself didn't actually compel me. This Darkman character is not as interesting as Batman or Dick Tracy or or Superman for that matter, but the direction was worth seeing.
I think the direction is the best part of the picture, except that I'm going to challenge you on one thing, which is I thought that the character of Darkman was more interesting than, let's say, Dick Tracy. Here's a guy that is really conflicted. I mean, he has a skill, which is his science, and he's scarred now, and then it's the same thing as like the movie The Fly, where the girlfriend doesn't know who he really is and doesn't know why he's troubled. I think that this guy is not the typical vengeful hero that's so obvious.
If you really want to go back to the beginning of this legend, it would be Swamp Thing, which was the movie that inspired The Fly as well as this, and it has the same thing. The laboratory explodes, the guy runs out, he lands in the water, he winds up horribly scarred, his girlfriend doesn't recognize them. You could have a whole festival of girl doesn't recognize monster movies.
Well, but I think that there's something there in this guy. He is played as a pretty much of a tortured guy, which is risky. I mean, the easiest thing is to play him as a guy who gets off on the violence. He can't control his rage. He loses control.
Yeah.
This Liam Neeson is an interesting character. I think it's a stronger picture than even you're saying, in addition to the direction, which I admire, because a guy is given a project like this, and how do you realize it? There is more put into this frame for frame than most of the pictures we see, and it's really a tribute to this director, Sam Raimi, but also to the writing of the character and the playing Liam Neeson. All very good. I think the theme of this show is that there are a lot of directing jobs here that took chances and did very well, all the way from Lynch to Sam Raimi, to Alan Moyle. These are people, and Nicholas Roeg, these are people that are trying to push the form.
More offbeat films than we get in the ordinary week.
Now comes my final guilty pleasure, Evil Dead 2, subtitled Dead by Dawn. Remember, Evil Dead 2, don't confuse it with Evil Dead 1. In a horror and gore genre that consists mostly of trash, this is a movie with style and a real sense of humor. It takes place in a vacation cottage, I guess most movies do, out in the middle of the woods, where you don't have to pay any extras, and the visitors accidentally invoke the presence of horrifyingly vile creatures by opening up the Book of the Dead and making the mistake of reading that incantation that you're never supposed to read. The creatures attack from the woods, from the attic, from the basement, from the windows, and of course, in the dark. In one of the movie's best scenes, the hero's hand is severed from his body, and it takes on a life of his own. Evil Dead 2 was directed by Sam Raimi, whose breakthrough hit was Darkman. He's one of the best of the new breed of talented exploitation directors, and what I like is the way he uses all the usual disgusting special effects, but he makes them funny. The movie includes one hilarious point-of-view shot in which the Evil Dead monster, which we never see, crashes through the underbrush with relentless momentum, sweeping everything out of its way like an unstoppable juggernaut. Nothing can come between this creature and its quarry until suddenly it gets confused and stops. Well, I really laughed at that shot. Okay. It was a shot that was funny. No dialogue, no characters. The shot was hilarious.
I know what you're talking about in the exploitation genre. I think I can do better than Evil Dead 2.
I shall see you dead.
Yeah. That's Bruce Campbell as a Kmart-style sales clerk, suddenly transported back to the Middle Ages through contact with that old movie Standby, The Book of the Dead. Somebody must have made a lot of copies of that book and laid them around in creepy forests. Anyway, in the style of the Back to the Future movies, but without that series' wit, he confronts these old English types with a modern weapon. Wow, we haven't seen that before.
It's a 12-gauge double-barreled Remington. S-Mart's top of the line. You can find this in the sporting goods department.
The best moments in the movie involve a ripoff of Ray Harryhausen's stop-action animated skeletons from Jason and the Argonauts. See that instead of this picture. They're more compelling than any of the humans in this film. Only contact with the Book of the Dead can get our hero back to the 20th century, so we get a special effects game of picking book number 1, book number 2, or book number 3. Now, there's a lot wrong with Army of Darkness. The special effects, as you could see, are great, but there isn't a single interesting human being in the film. There's also very little wit, and this surprised me, no real love interest. Army of Darkness was directed by Sam Raimi, who made the action hit Darkman a couple of years ago. In that film, we cared about Darkman. Here, every man is in the dark.
Well, I'm not voting thumbs up on it, but I guess I liked it better than you. And one of the things I liked was the state-of-the-art special effects.
Oh, I like that
There's a lot of special effects in this movie, and they're very inventive. And I think what Raimi is trying to do in this film is kind of make a naked gun approach to horror movies and medieval warfare films. But the problem is, it's not that funny because most of the funny stuff in this movie was already seen in his movie from 1987, Evil Dead 2, which this one is allegedly kind of a sequel to. And I liked Evil Dead 2 so much more that I can't recommend
But you know what I'm talking about. When he's standing among the troops, the old English troops there, they're meaningless to us.
Yeah, they are.
Bruce Campbell, he's pretty much of a stiff, I think. So really, you watch the special effects.
No, Bruce Campbell, I think, does exactly what the role calls for.
Oh, but he could have a little more personality.
Maybe so. Now it's time for our video pick of the week, and I would would like to recommend a strange and funny horror satire named Evil Dead 2: Dead by Dawn. I said earlier in the program that I was disappointed by its sequel, Army of Darkness, the Sam Raimi horror spoof that has great production values but somehow seems to be recycling its comedy approach. Maybe that's because I was a fan of Raimi's 1987 movie, Evil Dead 2, which also starred the hard-working Bruce Campbell as the bloodiest self-defense artist in horror history.
Groovy.
Evil Dead 2 is not for everyone, but for horror fans, it's one of the funniest movies of recent years. I recommend you take a look at it on home video. Now,
Last chance. Yes or no? Go to hell.
Sharon Stone and Gene Hackman star in The Quick and the Dead, a Western about a gunslinging competition where only one of the contestants can survive.
Our first film is The Quick and the Dead, and here's a picture that's well made, has an attractive cast, is full of action, and yet I was thoroughly bored. Why? It's just a repetitive fast draw contest as Sharon Stone plays a mysterious lady who rides into the town of Redemption and finds herself in the company of a bunch of quick draw artists, including young Leonardo DiCaprio, the talented young star of What's Eating Gilbert Grape. But he's all just mannerisms here, no depth of character.
So damn fast I can wake up at the crack of dawn, rob 2 banks, a train, and a stagecoach, shoot the tail feathers off a duck's ass at 300 feet, and still be back in bed before you wake up next to me.
Another fast gun is the town's mean mayor, played by Gene Hackman, playing much the same bully boy role that he had in Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven.
All I hear from you, you spineless cowards, is how poor you are, how you can't afford my taxes, my protection. And yet somehow, you've all managed to find the money to hire a professional gunfighter to kill me.
And another gunfighter is played by Lance Henriksen. And the whole rhythm of this picture is that a character is introduced, performs a stunt, and then gets ready for the big shootout.
Thank you. It's a neat trick. I heard you blew a little girl's thumb off in Reno doing that.
I am the best you'll ever see.
So I keep hearing. Shall we find out?
Naturally, there's a verbal showdown between Hackman and Sharon Stone.
Try to leave town, my men will kill you. You refuse to fight, my men will kill you. You had your chance to quit. Now it's gone.
The Quick and the Dead was directed with high energy by Sam Raimi, who made Darkman, but to bolster an empty story, he resorts to cartoon-like gimmicks of having bullets make outlandish holes in bodies so that you can see right through them, sort of like Al Cap's bullet holes, remember, in Fearless Fosdick? That's why The Quick and the Dead seems so empty. Ultimately, it's just a carnival game.
Yeah, I felt the same way. This is basically high noon, and the clock is stopped at noon. It's always high noon, and whenever that little minute hand goes over to the 12, 2 guys are shooting it out on Main Street over and over again. And you're right, though, about Sam Raimi, and he has some visual wit here. There's one scene where a guy walks into a saloon door, and he casts a shadow that is about 3 blocks long. That was good. And I also like the bullet holes, Gene, because at least I hadn't seen it before in a movie. So I enjoy the fact that he was pushing on the visual level, but I feel the story was just the same thing over and over.
I think he has to push it because he doesn't have a story.
Oh, when we come back, Bill Paxton and Billy Bob Thornton think they can get rich with a simple plan.
We gotta make this look like it was an accident.
Oh, my God, look at this. Oh, my God. How much you think is in here?
God almighty. These are $100 bills.
3 Midwestern hunters find a plane crash in a bag of money, lots of money, and that's the setup for A Simple Plan, which is a fine psychological thriller that digs deeper and deeper into the values and the dreams of these small-town men. They think of calling the police, but no, they decide to keep the money and split it 3 ways. Bill Paxton plays the college graduate, Billy Bob Thornton is his slow-witted brother, and Brent Briscoe is Thornton's hard-drinking buddy. It's Billy Bob who just can't keep a secret. He's already blurted out to the sheriff that he heard a plane with engine trouble.
Now when they find the plane, they realize the money's gone, they're gonna know right off who took it.
Well, that's what's cool about it, though, Hank. I mean, you know, if we wouldn't tell somebody if we were the ones that did it.
I mean, it's not like he said that you actually saw a plane going down. Just you thought you might have heard one with engine trouble.
You want me to burn the money? I am not going to prison over this.
Bridget Fonda plays Paxton's wife, who is really the smartest of them all and has lots of apparently good ideas.
You have to go back and return some of the money.
What?
A lot. Like 500,000. See, that way when they find the plane, they'll assume nobody's been there yet.
As their scheme begins to come apart, Thornton, in a great scene, confides secrets he's never told his brother ever before.
God, Hank, you know, I've never even kissed a girl before. So, you know, if being rich will change that, I'm all for it.
And Fonda has a great scene, too, after Paxton begins to think it would have been better never to have found that money.
Is that what you think? Is that what you think you want? Walking off to the feed store every morning for the next 30 years, waiting for Tom Butler to retire or die so you can finally get a raise?
A Simple Plan was directed by Sam Raimi, previously known for his entertaining horror films like Evil Dead 2. With this film, he steps right up to the A-list. A Simple Plan is as powerful, observant, and merciless as In Cold Blood. And it's impressive the way Raimi and his actors make these characters seem so real, so convincing, so carefully seen, so persuasively motivated at every moment, so that everything that happens seems to have a reason. In a way, this is a thriller, but in another way, it could be a story by Dostoevsky. I think it's one of the year's best films.
I think it's very good, and I'm glad you credited the director. From the beginning of the film, you know you're in the hands of a director.
Yes.
There's a sense of foreboding, and he's got the rhythm right, so that as they, you know, discover another idea, the timing seems right. And that's something frequently that's all wrong in this kind of, listen, we have seen these kinds of stories of botched plans, but, you know, they jump ahead too quickly to some action sequence.
That's exactly right. You can see what leads them to each step.
Right.
And you know, a couple of weeks ago, we reviewed this horrible film, Very Bad Things.
Oh.
I didn't find the racial implications very pleasant either. A point is made that this group of bachelors includes several people who are Jewish, and that spins off some Jewish jokes, if you want to call them that, about body bags and body parts that I found thoroughly distasteful, especially since their victims are an Asian woman and a black man. I thought, what's that about? It seemed to me this is basically a serious drama, maybe, and would have been better there as a serious drama, and that by trying to force it into humor, it just made it obscene, which took a bunch of guys who think of calling the cops and then decide to keep it a secret and tries to turn it into a comedy, things that are not funny. I said at that time, if they played it straight, it might have been a better movie. Here's a somewhat similar plot. Three guys covering things up. They do play it straight. It is an incomparably better movie.
And credit a director. I mean, this is a film that kids in film school could study for how this guy establishes a mood, foreboding, and then pacing.
Absolutely, Sam Raimi. Number 4, A Simple Plan by Sam Raimi. The stunning story of 4 people who think they can get away with stealing a fortune. My video pick this week is one of the best films of recent years, and although it got Oscar nominations, it didn't draw audiences as large as I at least think it deserved. The movie is A Simple Plan, and it tells the story of 3 small-town neighbors who stumble across a plane that has crashed in the woods with $4 million on board.
It's the American dream, and a damn gym bag. He just wants to walk away from it.
You work for the American dream. You don't steal it.
Then this is even better.
Bill Paxton plays the smartest of the 3, a college graduate. Billy Bob Thornton is his dim-witted brother, and Brent Briscoe is a friend of Thornton's and a very loose cannon.
I don't have the money here, and even if I did, I wouldn't give you any.
Oh, come on. Now, look, just because you have it doesn't mean it's yours. I mean, part of that is my money.
Part of it might be your money, if we decide to keep it.
A Simple Plan moves inexorably from a dream of wealth to a nightmare of blood and guilt, and director Sam Raimi handles the material with perfect pitch and timing so that we're drawn step by step into the trap that these men set for themselves. It's a powerful film, and it's my video pick of the week. Coming up next, Kevin Costner plays an aging baseball hero in For Love of the Game.
I don't need any help.
I can see that. I can see you got your car kicked completely into submission.
Kevin Costner plays a great baseball pitcher who's starting to slow down at the age of 40 in For Love of the Game. And Kelly Preston is Jane, the rider he meets when her car breaks down. They meet in a meet-cute. This is Costner's 3rd baseball picture. In Field of Dreams, he was a farmer who built a baseball diamond in a cornfield. And in Bull Durham, he played an aging catcher who knows the ropes. He's sort of like in that picture the character in this one played by John C. Reilly as his best friend on the team.
Chap, don't throw it away too early.
Today I'm throwing hard, Gus.
You and me? One more time?
Why not?
The game is intercut with flashbacks of his romance with Jane, who he loves, but keeps pushing away.
What's the problem, Billy? Talk to me.
You don't want to talk. You just want to give me your version of why she quit.
One nice touch is the way Costner's character keeps up a running commentary on the mound, talking to the batters that he faces.
You're guessing now, aren't you? Well, here's your fastball. Right down the pipe, just so you don't walk away thinking I was afraid to give it to you.
For Love of the Game is soppy and shallow the rest of the way, maybe because its two main characters are so uninteresting. They have the kind of relationship that could be diagnosed by filling out a quiz in a woman's magazine. They'd better keep fighting because that keeps them interested. If they ever get married, they'd bore each other to death.
Yeah, they really needed to build a cornfield in this movie because there was so much corn going on. You know, I liked Field of Dreams a lot, and I loved Message in a Bottle, though a lot of people didn't. I went for the corniness. I like Costner. I like her. But this movie fails on every level. The baseball is bad. The romance is bad. The interconnection between the two is bad. There's really nothing that works at all in this picture.
And it goes back and forth, and the problem is it doesn't just have one I mean, every time they go back to the relationship, he's sulking in a hotel room, or he wants her to go back to New York, or he doesn't know why she came to Florida, or what is she doing here? Until finally, you want this girl to say, I'm going to get a life, goodbye, you know, and then at the same time, then he's always weeping when she's not around. And eventually, it just gets to the point where you say, get over it.
Yeah, and for me, I actually object to it as a baseball movie because I like baseball a lot, and I enjoyed the 8th inning, which is about the only moment in this entire movie where they allowed you to watch some baseball. Early in the picture, there's a shot where Costner knocks out all the sound around him. Everything, he gets that one bit of focus, and this picture had none of that focus, and that was really the problem with it. It never quite hit it on the mark.
Okay.
And coming up next, Kate Blanchett is enlisted to help solve a murder in The Gift.
What's the matter? You see something bad?
Your daddy. He took things away from you when you were a little boy.
Kate Blanchett plays Annie Wilson, a young widow in the rural South who has psychic powers that she uses to counsel people in our next movie called The Gift. And this is an unusual combination of thriller with the nuances and sensitivity of a more serious drama. Annie's gift gets her into danger when she befriends a battered wife, and one of Annie's children is threatened by the woman's violent husband, played here by Keanu Reeves.
You know, I feel sorry for you and your brothers. You and your mama being a witch and all. If she don't stop her evil ways, someday somebody's gonna burn her up. And then you boys are gonna be without a daddy or mama.
Her son's principal, played by Greg Kinnear, is engaged to the town beauty, played by Katie Holmes.
You think we'll live happily ever after?
Then the fiancé is murdered, and Annie's psychic visions lead her to the body and make her into a courtroom target at the murder trial.
I can't use my gift for personal gain.
Except for those, what you call them, donations. You've had some personal trouble with Donnie Barksdale, haven't you, Miss Wilson?
The Gift was directed by Sam Raimi and written by Billy Bob Thornton and Tom Epperson. Raimi and Thornton also worked together on A Simple Plan, a great movie. And again, this time, they deepen and strengthen the thriller elements in their story by creating such believable characters. Blanchett is the key. She's a strong, quiet woman whose calm makes some of the scenes scarier than if she ran around being hysterical. Oscar winner Hilary Swank is convincing as the battered wife, and Giovanni Ribisi is creepy as another of the psychic's clients. The Gift is a surprisingly effective film.
It really is, and you mentioned the cast, and obviously the cast is really good, but there have been other horror thrillers in recent months, something like What Lies Beneath. That had a great cast, too. The key is what you mentioned, Billy Bob Thornton's script and Sam Raimi's direction. There's not really that many surprises here, but it's just done so well, and the scenes that are played out, the quiet moments before the big shocks that we know we're going to get and are still a little surprised about, that's what carries this for me and makes this film worth recommending. It's just a different level, as you say, a more literate take on a time-honored thriller that we've seen a million times
as I was watching the movie, I thought, for some reason, of the novels of Barbara Kingsolver, who takes these women and puts them in a situation where their strength and their ability to hold things together is threatened by everything in their environment. And I know that this isn't the same kind of story, but the character of played by Cate Blanchett is handled with the same delicacy and the same detail, so it becomes a real person and a real story, even though it's a thriller.
And people like Katie Holmes and Hilary Swank and Keanu Reeves, smart actors who will take offbeat roles in a movie like this.
Okay, our next movie is Spider-Man, directed by cult favorite Sam Raimi. After 17 years in studio development hell, the Marvel Comics superhero finally makes the leap to features with this big, colorful, and mostly triumphant joyride. Tobey Maguire is science nerd Peter Parker, who goes through some startling changes after he's been bitten by a genetically supercharged spider. Kirsten Dunst is Mary Jane Watson, the girl next door.
Wow, great reflexes.
Well, that seems like a bit of an understatement, but Raimi has the characters giving comic book reactions to the comic book situations. Like here, where aspiring photographer Parker's split personality gives him exclusive access to the mysterious creature who has all of New York caught in his web. Willem Dafoe is the Green Goblin, a scientist who undergoes a mutation that conveniently coincides with the birth of Spider-Man. And not since Lois Lane has a plucky gal in the big city gotten into as many pickles as Mary Jane. In style, story, and tone, Spider-Man has a lot more in common with the first Christopher Reeve Superman than with the original Batman, which had a more conflicted superhero and a much darker and more interesting look. You'd probably be freaking out if you discovered you were part arachnid, but Peter's transformation is played mostly for laughs. If it weren't for the occasional voiceover, you'd hardly think he was troubled at all by his fate. But then again, maybe we shouldn't expect the movie to take itself too seriously when the lead is a teenager in tights who bungee jumps across Manhattan. I am giving thumbs up to Spider-Man as an energetic romp.
You know, my thumb is down on this movie, but it's sort of a split decision. I do like the details of Spider-Man's origin story, and Tobey Maguire does a good job of playing the insecure and shy Peter Parker. But the action scenes lack presence and conviction. When you see Spider-Man flying through the skies and leaping between buildings, he looks like an artificial cartoon character. He moves too fast, without the weight and presence of flesh and blood. The movie could have done more with the scenes where Peter Parker learns of his new powers, and the special effects could have taken themselves more seriously and not seemed so lightweight and perfunctory. There's a moment when he comes from the top of a skyscraper all the way down to street level and back up again, and I never felt for 1 second that that was like a 140-pound teenage boy. It looked more like Mighty Mouse.
See, I would disagree. Mighty Mouse, yeah, a little bit. It does have that, that colorful comic book feel, and we do agree that there should have been, I think, a little darker side. I mean, if this happened to you, you'd be going, my God, I'm going to be this spider creature. But I would disagree with you about the special effects. I thought when Spider-Man is going through the streets of Manhattan, it really looked like he was swinging from building to building and jumping here and sticking against walls here in the scene where he has to choose between Mary Jane and the trolley car, whatever it is, full of kids. That's pretty good stuff. That looks pretty good to me.
Take that scene where he has to decide, and without giving too much away, he winds up with a trolley car.
That's a good scene.
So, it isn't, because you never get the feeling that there's real weight involved. There's one perfunctory shot of the spider web kind of pulling off against whatever it's hanging from, but you don't get the idea that real tension and real risk are involved.
To have some sort of special effect where people were pushing you in your seat so you'd feel the weight of this stuff.
I felt that I visually...
The sound is great when the cables are flicking through the air.
No, visually,
I thought it looked pretty good.
Okay, I know Spider-Man is making millions even as I speak. And if you like movies about superheroes who jump over towering skyscrapers, you've probably seen it already or you're planning to. But if you can't make up your mind, here's what I think. If you're not familiar with the legendary Marvel Comics crime fighter, it tells how an orphan social outcast turns into a crime-fighting champion. Shy, retiring Peter Parker is played by Tobey Maguire. He's bitten by a radioactive spider and suddenly has muscles and a lack of any human frailty. Not only that, but he can spin powerful webs and execute amazing jumps.
For me, the choice to live an ordinary life is no longer an option.
Maguire is perfect as the nerd. I really liked him as Peter Parker, but I think he takes the transformation into Spider-Man too lightly. He instantly assumes the mantle of superhero with too much ease, I think, and too little fear or astonishment.
Cheese!
The damsel in distress is Kirsten Dunst. She sort of falls in love with Spider-Man, but only has a fond regard for Peter, who has a terrible crush on him. This role could do for Dunst what Star Wars did for Carrie Fisher.
Wow, great reflexes.
The character I find most fascinating is a tycoon villain played by Willem Dafoe. His Jekyll and Hyde interaction with Maguire really works. First he's a nice guy, then he's the Green Goblin. Industry rumors say this movie cost about $130 million to make, but to me the action sequences don't live up to the billing. When Spider-Man is leaping from building to building, it looks more like a cartoon. The animation isn't as convincing as the live action sequences. I'm only giving Spider-Man 2.5 stars. I like the live action stuff. I thought the Peter Parker material was good, but I thought the special effects and the action sequences left something to be desired. Still, I know the movie's going to gross millions over the next couple of weeks, and then it's time for Attack of the Clones. Spider-Man 2 opens next Wednesday, or actually Tuesday at midnight, and I think it may be the best superhero movie I have ever seen. We reviewed it on an earlier show, but I want to take another look at the way director Sam Raimi respects the classic Spider-Man character by giving full attention to the dilemma of Peter Parker.
What do you want?
I want you to find your friend, Spider-Man. Tell him to meet me at the West Side Tower at 3 o'clock.
I don't know where he is.
Find him. Or I'll peel the flesh off her bones.
Spider-Man 2 is a much better, deeper, more effective film, and Maguire's complexity as an actor is fully utilized here. He's good at playing self-effacing characters who seem to doubt themselves, and even when he's Spider-Man, he seems vulnerable, as in those scenes where he loses his web-spinning ability. This is a superhero movie for people who don't go to superhero movies. I'm telling my friends, they say, I don't want to see Spider-Man. I say, you might be surprised.
Yes, you do, because if you took out all the action scenes, which I certainly don't want to do, you'd still have an interesting movie here.
Yes, you would.
And part of it is because the Spider-Man character is so flawed. He's younger than the usual superhero character. He's got all these problems. He can't make ends meet. He's getting fired from jobs. And, you feel like he's vulnerable. I also think it's key that, unlike in Batman and in Superman, where you have, like, Gotham and Metropolis, New York City's like a character in this movie. Spider-Man exists in a kind of realistic New York City with the tabloid newspapers and people who see him and go, oh, yeah, there's Spider-Man on the job. Sometimes they help him. Sometimes they wonder if he's a bad guy.
One thing that you said the first time we reviewed the movie was you didn't like Dr. Octopus as much as you liked the Green Goblin in the first movie.
That's
now,
true.
I have given it a lot more thought, and I would like to tell you that I think Dr. Octopus is at least as good and maybe better than the Green Goblin, and that the performance is fabulous.
Well, I'll think a little bit more about that Doc Ock thing as I'm walking around. I mean, as I said in the first review, the villains aren't even the key thing here. It's not like Batman where it's like, oh, Joker, Penguin, he's going to take on these different villains because there's a lot more going on.
But the villains
with this
at least make every movie distinctive.
This big screen superhero has definitely grown up since I first met him 2 summers ago. I didn't like the original Spider-Man, but this one is a giant leap forward. I was enthralled by Spider-Man 2. It's more vivid, keen, and alive this time. Peter Parker is finding out what all superheroes eventually learn. There's a steep downside to having great powers. It's hard to hold down a job and have a love life when you're defending humanity.
Look at you, Peter. Your grades have been declining. You always appear exhausted.
I know, I'm trying.
If that's not enough, there's a new dark force to deal with. Dr. Otto Octavius starts out as an ambitious, devoted scientist who Peter admires, but an experiment gone wrong turns him into Doc Ock.
Find Spider-Man, or I'll peel the flesh off her bones.
Alfred Molina's wild-eyed and over the top as this scoundrel with his deadly tentacles, and that's just how I like my supervillain. Kirsten Dunst returns as the fair Mary Jane Watson. She's a New York actress now and is fed up with Peter's mystery life.
My best friend, who cares so much about me, can't make an 8 o'clock curtain. After all these years, he's nothing to me but an empty seat.
Aunt May, played by Rosemary Harris, shares wisdom with her conflicted nephew.
I believe there's a hero in all of us. Gives us strength, makes us noble. Even though sometimes we have to give up the thing we want the most.
I think director Sam Raimi got just the right balance this time between the superhero's powers and the frailty of the young man behind the web. I gotta tell you, Spider-Man 2 just may be the best superhero movie I have ever seen. The visual effects have a glossy, magical look, and they really do capture the spirit of those original Marvel comic books. The story reflects Spider-Man's insecurities and personal problems. One moment he's saving the world, the next moment he's dealing with unemployment and a depressing love life, or even rescuing kids playing in traffic. I wasn't that impressed with the first Spider-Man movie, but Spider-Man 2 is a completely different story. I give it 4 stars. Counting down the best films of the year, the number 4 film on my list is Spider-Man 2, and I guess I'm amazed as you are that Spidey made my top 10, but this was a really good film, the best superhero movie ever made. Director Sam Raimi told a real story on top of the special effects, and Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst made the conflicted life of an overworked superhero into something both exciting and sometimes kind of touching.
I want to tell you the truth. Here it is. I'm Spider-Man.
All right, let's get to it. Our first movie is Spider-Man 3. It's one of the most expensive movies ever made, and it's filled with eye-popping, jaw-dropping special effects. It's also far too long, and it's crippled by a meandering storyline, some tiresome returning characters, and a couple of lackluster villains. Now, I thought Spider-Man 2 was maybe the best superhero sequel ever, but the third installment of the wildly popular Spidey franchise is only moderately entertaining. Of course, the action sequences don't disappoint. That's Bryce Dallas Howard as Gwen, one of the many underdeveloped new characters who pop up. She's got a thing for Peter Parker / Spidey, but she's just a nice, kind of boring girl, which kind of makes her like Mary Jane Watson, played by Kirsten Dunst.
I'd like to sing on stage for the rest of my life with you in the first row.
I'll be there.
Tell me you love me.
I love you.
Thomas Hayden Church from Sideways plays Flint Marko, a.k.a. Sandman. He's one of the goofiest villains in comic book annals. He's an escaped convict who literally falls into a molecular fusion test pit, I think that's what it is, and he becomes half man, half sand monster. Note that Spidey is wearing a black suit in some scenes, tapping into his dark side. That's because a slimy creature from outer space just happened to hitch a ride on his scooter and attach itself to Peter's face. I'm serious about that. Topher Grace plays the slimy Eddie Brock, who becomes the even slimier Venom. Spidey also has to fend off James Franco's Harry, who has become a mini Green Goblin of sorts.
Harry, you knew this was coming, Pete.
Listen to me. I didn't kill your father.
He was trying to kill me! He killed himself! Shut up!
Meanwhile, Peter has to contend with Mary Jane's whining and sulking, his aunt's boring relationship advice, and his stalled photography career. Director Sam Raimi sprinkles in some humorous touches, maybe too many. Even when Spider-Man dons the black suit and flirts with the dark side, it's played mostly for laughs. Spider-Man 3 has an identity crisis. It's often thrilling but never scary, and at times it seems almost campy. Sandman and Venom are second-rate villains, while Maguire, Franco, and Dunst just seem to be repeating themselves. Now, if there's going to be a Spider-Man 4, here's hoping Spidey ditches the boring girlfriend and meets up with some truly worthy opponents. So, Christy, I got to give it thumbs down.
Thumbs down from me, too, and I'm so sad to report that.
I am, too. I'm disappointed.
I love the first two. The second one is fantastic. It's so well written. The problem here is that, you're right, it meanders. It's all over the place. Too many villains, too many plot lines. People come and go out of nowhere. Right. I don't really care about any of them. I was not even aware that Topher Grace's character has a name. I didn't realize it was called Venom until your thing just
But
now.
I mean, and I like Topher Grace a lot, but right here he's sort of like the intern villain. I mean, he's really not very menacing at all. I'm just not buying it. And the Sandman dude, and I know that that's a character from the comic books, although they now have to give him a poignant backstory line about how he's trying to get money for his daughter, so he has to give speeches about how she's sick and he's not a bad guy. But what's the deal with him? He becomes a big Hulk-like Sandman guy, and then he hits you with his big sand fist. I mean, the Sandman, ooh, he gets in your contact lenses. Oh, that scratched my cornea. I mean, it's not really very menacing.
His fallibility confuses me, because sometimes you can, like, punch through him. Other times he can just swoop you up. Like,
and sometimes he's really big.
What can he do? And the first time you see him become sand, it is kind of cool. I have to disagree, though. I don't think that any of the action sequences really work for me. The first one especially, the first big set piece, looks really fake and cartoony and really video gamey to me. And just took me out of it entirely. Like, multi-millions of dollars, and it looks like a cartoon.
Well, you know, I think some of the scenes are great. I know what you're saying. And then there's this whole thing where Peter Parker kind of taps into his dark side and thinks he's a hipster, and it plays like something like Night at the Roxbury or The Mask, instead of something where he's really menacing and he's a sexual predator. He's just a dork in a better suit.
Right.
And I'm like, what is this doing in this movie? And he's playing the piano, and Kirsten Dunst is singing, and all this stuff is going on. It's like, who cares?
Actually, he looks kind of like Jared Leto when he's like all dark-eyed and his hair's in front of his face. But even his dark side is dorky, and so is it really truly menacing ever? It's not, and it's just, it's all over the place, you know, and it's too long too.
It's way too long, Christine. I think, you know, when you have something like the Christopher Nolan version of Batman, where there's really a truly dark side to a beloved comic book character, that's so well done, and to try to do it here, it just seems kind of bubblegumish. It just, it's very disappointing. I'm sure this movie is going to make kabillions of dollars.
Right. What we're saying does not matter right here at all.
You know, I still think it's not nearly as good as the first one, and certainly not in the same league as Spider-Man 2.
Second one was great. Oh well.